Moms who know do less so they can focus on what matters most, taking care of themselves, their families, and living their God-given purpose. Moms who know focus on the little things they can do that grow to have a huge impact. You are connecting with your family, your true self, and your God-given purpose. You are a mom who knows. Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and my guest today is Chantel Allen. Chantel, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, this is going to be a great call as we really dive into some things that are going to help us in our family relationships. And Chantel is a perfect person to do that. She is a life coach, a health coach. She is a mom of 4 kids, and it was really her kids that kind of led her down this path. So she says she has one child that struggles with high anxiety and one that has really big emotions. So I'm going to let you kind of take over from there and tell us a little bit about your journey with your children and then how that led you down this path of becoming a life coach.
Yeah. So like you said, I have 4 kids, but my 2 middles, I always call them kind of my more difficult children. I don't want to label them for that, but I think most people understand when I say that. My son, probably about 5 years ago, he was in 3rd grade and his teacher came to me and told me, you know what? His anxiety is so bad that he can't even perform in school. He would hyperventilate taking tests. He would stop himself from doing anything because he didn't think it was perfect. And so it started me on this path of, okay, I've got to get this kid some tools to be able to just to function in life. And so it got me thinking about all these different avenues. And I went down the path of, we talked to the school counselor, we did some therapy, and therapy is great for so many reasons and for so many people. But for my son, he wasn't getting tools, application for him to be able to navigate in the moment. And so I started listening to some podcasts, and Jody Moore, which I think maybe a lot of people know, but she's another big life coach. She has a podcast, and it's actually a podcast for moms. But I had been learning some of the tools that she was teaching. I saw some relief that I was experiencing, and I was just like, you know what? I need to give this to my son, see if this will work for him. I gave him a couple of podcasts and I could just see a switch in him. And it was just a change in just almost relief and hope and just more understanding about where his anxiety was coming from and what he could do with those emotions that he was having. And in the same regard with my daughter, who has very big emotions, I used to have, and I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. I still struggle with my kids in a lot of areas, but she has the defiance where she would look at me if I told her to go put away her backpack and she would walk the other direction. And so I had to learn how to navigate my emotions around my child who had big emotions. And so I learned how to manage myself, not react, and really understand where my emotions were coming from, because I was blaming my daughter for so many years as to why I was feeling the way that I was. And it turns out it's actually not my daughter that was causing all of my emotions. And so I just started learning these tools, and it's changed the way that I am as a mom. It's changed who I am as a spouse to my husband. And I now can pass these tools down to my kids who can use them as they navigate what they go through on a day-to-day basis.
That is so powerful. I just first want to applaud you for going that route. I recognize that sometimes when our kids are struggling with things, some with anxiety in particular, sometimes they need medication. And so no slam on anyone who goes that route.
Exactly.
But I do think it is so powerful to first say, okay, what tools can I give you? What else can we do? What can we do differently? And to look at the problem that way and to see what we can do to cope, because so much of, there is a lot in our power, and a lot of times we feel powerless when we come up against these things. And I love that you were able to turn to tools, because when we have tools, we're able to fix things. That's the whole point, right? We're able to use those tools and to use them in our lives. And when you use them effectively, you can get rid of some of the same symptoms that you would, maybe through through medication. And just like I said, some people, there's absolutely a need for medication in some circumstances, but it's my belief that it's a great way to start first with what
Mm-hmm.
can we do with tools that really gets at the heart of the problem. And so I think that's awesome. All right. So, one of the things that you talked about is really looking inward and figuring out your own emotions rather than kind of blaming them on your daughter as you dealt
Mm-hmm.
with her defiance. And one thing that you teach is about dropping our expectations of others. And I think that that goes hand in hand with what you were saying about your daughter. So, talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah. So I learned this tool from my training, and it's this idea of a manual. And a manual, if you think about where we have manuals for our car, we have manuals for even our cell phones. And it's an instruction book for how we believe someone should behave. And we create these manuals without even really realizing it by, just observing people around us and deciding what is right or wrong and what others should or shouldn't do. And we have actually manuals for just about everyone in our lives. And I mean truly everyone. And the way I like to think about it is even when you're driving on the road, you have a manual for drivers. They should drive, if they're in the right lane, they should be slower than the left lane, or they should turn off the highway faster. Those are just simple ideas of what a manual can look like. But we have manuals for every person in our lives, including our children, including our spouses. And the problem with these manuals is that we use it as a reason to be unhappy if or when, the different people in our lives don't follow that manual. And some of the examples I always give is, our spouse should return our text right away, even though they're at work, or our spouse should remember our birthdays when we want them to, or our daughter should be more grateful, or our daughter should listen to us the very first time. And when we understand that these expectations are just unwritten and we don't tell them about it and we tie our emotions to it, we can really understand that we can drop that. They're all optional. We don't need to have them for us to feel the way that we want to feel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And I'm just thinking through kind of the application here. And you mentioned driving. My 16-year-old just got her driver's license. And as we've gone through this process with her of having a driver's permit, it's so interesting. So many people get so irritated, like, oh, this girl's going too slow, and they'll honk their horn, or she'll do some, crazy maneuver, and they get frustrated. And it's so interesting. It is this idea of, they know what other drivers should do.
Mm-hmm.
And I never did this, but I thought I should put a sign in the back window that says student driver, because all of a sudden that would switch their manual, right? They would
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, I expect something different. She's just learning. So I
Exactly.
expect her to drive worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Well, and we see it for even, I always think about it when you go to Walmart and you have the cashier and, oh, the cashier should check us out faster, or the cashier should smile at us, or people don't cut people in line. We really do have manuals for every person in our lives. And we don't notice it. Like usually when I'm talking about this with my clients, they're like, oh no, I don't have manuals for people. But then you start to notice that, no, really, even for your dogs, you have a manual for how a dog should behave and act to be a good dog. So it's just noticing that there's nothing wrong that we have a manual. It's just being aware of it and deciding if it's serving you or if we might need to take a look at it and decide to drop it.
Yeah. So is there ever, I know we're going to get into the concept of how we drop our manual. Is there a time when we want to keep it? When like this, do we, this manual's serving me well and I want to keep it here? Or is it something we always need to let go of?
I love this question because I think a lot of times we want to hold on to manuals, but if you understand the only reason why we have a manual is because we want to feel a certain way. And so if we can understand that actually we don't need manuals at all to feel the way that we want to, then you really can drop every single manual that you have in your life. And when people do, quote unquote, live up to your manual, it's again, not because you control the other person. It's just because you had a thought that created that feeling for you. Because the concept that I love to teach my clients is that your thinking is what creates your emotions, not the other person, not what someone does or doesn't do. You have a thought about what they do or don't do, and that is what's creating the emotion that you want to have. So you don't need anybody else to follow a manual for you to feel the way that you want to.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's so interesting because really it just can lead to so much frustration, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, you're not doing what I expected you to do." And that's the part. That's the frustration. It's not what they're doing, it's what you are thinking about what they're doing. I love that connection there that, you know, that manual is that in between. That's what
Mm-hmm.
we have to let go of. So, okay, well then I totally want to learn, how do we drop the manual? We're going to go through 3 ways. So, number 1 is pay attention and notice the manuals you have in your life currently. How do we do that?
Yeah. So I love to do this exercise called a thought download. And I think a lot of people have heard this before in like a brain dump or just different variations of it. But I recommend you first get this manual out on a piece of paper. So you need to decide who you want to talk about first or think about first. And get a piece of paper and then you start to write. And I always tell my client, don't be judgmental, because you might notice some things that come out on this piece of paper like, I cannot believe that I feel like they should be like this, or that's kind of unrealistic for me to keep thinking this. But you have these thoughts anyways, so we want to get them out on a piece of paper so that we can take a look at it. And then you need to see what are your rules or the manual for your person. What should they do? What shouldn't they be doing? How would you like them to act? And then decide, how would you feel if this person just complied with all of these rules that you have? And that would be the very first thing. So then you want to start dismantling this manual, and you just have to become aware of the fact that people are going to behave how they're going to behave. And these are all optional thoughts that you have on this piece of paper anyways. No one, I don't think anybody ever sits down their spouse or their children and said, okay, here's all of my expectations that I have for you to make me feel good. But we have them and they're super unrealistic. And so it's just noticing that, oh my gosh, I have all of these things that I've expected my children to do or my spouse to do, and just questioning every single one of those things that are on that piece of paper. And then just getting curious about how your relationship might be different if you just accepted just as they were, and practice noticing them for the first time without all of they should be's in your head, and just be curious about the possibility that they might be just living life the exact way that they should be. And this was magic to me when I figured this out, that maybe this person is doing exactly everything that they're supposed to be doing. I don't need to try and control them or change them. And it's just a beautiful place to actually get to. So that's the first part of it.
Yeah. Okay. So I love this in theory. And as we're talking, like, oh, yes, this is beautiful. And then I think about my own kids, but he should
Mm-hmm.
be doing this. Like
Yes.
that. Okay. That kind of just blew my mind because I love it, the theory of it. And then I'm thinking, but as a mom, how do you reconcile? You're responsible for these little humans, and there are things that they need to be doing. There are things that it's important that they do in life to become responsible human beings. How do you let go of your manual and still teach your kids?
So this is something that I struggled with for a long time, but I think the biggest difference here is we can have still expectations for our children. I mean, that, like you said, that's our responsibility, but we don't tie our emotions to whether they follow through with those things or not. That's the biggest difference with this. So, for instance, if I tell my daughter that she has to do her chore before she goes to bed at night and she doesn't, I don't tie my emotions to it being like, oh my gosh, now I'm super frustrated because she didn't do what I asked her to do. I just now can follow through and just say, you know what, being the loving mom that I want to be, I now have to lay down the consequence. And I'm so sorry, but this is what I'm choosing to do to help you become the person that I hope you'll be. But on the other side of this is also just remembering that we came down to this earth with our agency. And our children, unfortunately, like, I think I would love to have a conversation on the other side talking about the fact that I don't think our kids should have agency all the time, but they are. And we need to understand that we can teach and we can do all of the things that we want to do, but our kids still have the agency to behave how they're going to behave. So we can do all of these things and have all of these expectations, but we have to drop the the point of it saying like, oh my gosh, I have to control their outcome, because we can't. There's no possible way. And you're actually causing yourself more struggle and pain thinking that you can. So that's the biggest difference, is just doing what you possibly can, but then dropping the feelings or the expectation that if they follow it, then you'll feel good. You can feel good whether or not they follow through or not.
Okay, I love that distinction. I think that's so powerful because that really brings it home. It's not letting go. It's not abdicating any kind of responsibility. It's just not making their choices responsible for your emotions. It's taking
Yes.
that out. So, oh, I love it. Okay, so number 2 then of how to drop our manual is the idea that each of us are responsible for meeting our own needs. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I think this is kind of going back to what I was talking about at the very beginning, is just learning. For instance, when we get into a marriage, we had this idea growing up that the other person is just supposed to meet our needs. They're there to complete us. And I have learned that this can actually be a very painful, poisonous thought, because then we're kind of trying to control the other person. And we're basically saying, okay, if you go get me this or do this, then I'll feel love from you. And so if we understand that that's really impossible, and even if they do follow through with that, we're basically controlling the way that they are. So they're not even able to be who they really want to be or who they are. And so if we can just show up and say, you know what? If I want to feel loved by getting a gift, then I'm going to go get myself a gift. Or if I feel like I need to have more connection in my marriage, then I can go out and take care of that connection by myself. I don't need somebody else to do anything for me to feel a different way. And I like to think of this as like a puppy situation. Like if we've all experienced a puppy, it's the same thing with our children and with our spouse. If you can think of your spouse and your kids as a puppy, you can look at that puppy, and even if they, have a mistake inside your house, or if they chew up something, you're mad at them for a second, but then you're right back to, oh my gosh, you're the cutest thing ever. I can't believe that, I was ever mad at you. And we don't expect them to do anything. And so if we can come to the same idea and just take care of your own needs, and then treat your kids of, they don't need to do anything for you to feel good. Your spouse doesn't need anything to do good. You just get to love them just like a puppy and come together and just have fun. Then seriously, your relationships can be up-leveled to the point where I don't know, it's just the most magical thing in the world to just kind of get to that point.
Yeah. It sounds magical, like a little unicorn, like it almost doesn't exist.
Too easy, right? Too easy.
Well, yeah. And I'm just thinking, that just sounds so tricky to really say, we do have things that we expect of our spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And that are necessary there to have a happy marriage. And if those needs are not getting met, I get what you're saying. Like, yeah, okay, if you need a gift, get yourself a gift. And then that need is met. But then the need to feel connected to your spouse is still going unmet.
Yes. And I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions that we have. And so I like to teach that connection is a feeling, right? If you think about where it could fit in the grand scheme of how we show up in our lives, connection is a feeling that we want to have with our spouse. So again, if you go back to what I was talking about before, your thoughts are the only thing that create connection for you. So even, this is an example that I like to give to people. So let's say your spouse comes to you and he gives you a bouquet of flowers. And he's just like, oh my gosh, I came home from work today, was thinking about you. Here's a bouquet of flowers. Now, if you are thinking different thoughts, for instance, what did he do wrong? Then there's not going to be connection there. Or it's going to be like, what's he up to? There's not going to be that connection there. But if you decide, oh my gosh, he just loves me, then there's going to be connection there. It has nothing to do with the flowers or what your husband did. It's all based off of how you are thinking about what's going on in your relationship. So there's always choice in every single thing. And I always like to think of it as the feelings that you have make you behave a certain way. So if you feel connection with your spouse, no matter what he does or does not do, then you are going to show up more connected. You're going to be more responsive. You're going to be more involved and present in the moment, as opposed to saying, I don't feel connected. Then you're probably going to pull away. You're going to be avoiding him. You're not going to want to start up a conversation with him. So it really does come down to the things that you want to feel and think about your spouse or your children at the same time. Does that help with that?
Yeah, I think that's super powerful. I think that's great. Okay. And because we all want to feel good, we all want to feel connected, and I love that idea that it's a choice. I have a quick experience with this. I've shared this before on the podcast, I think, but when my husband started traveling for work, and he had started a new job and he was traveling and he was really busy, and I wasn't getting my social need met from
Mm-hmm.
him. And we hang out together a lot. And so I had to say, okay, I need more socially because I work from home and I'm alone with a toddler, but I don't necessarily need it from him. So how can I get that need met? And so I, made more time to go out with friends, and I found what I needed and let him do what he needed to do. And it actually helped our marriage, because I wasn't looking for that. He just didn't have the time to give that at that point in his work. And so I can see in, real life application how that works. And then I wasn't angry or bitter or anything
Mm-hmm.
because he was working. It just, oh, I'm still getting my needs met, and when he's there and available, great, we'll still spend time together. But if he's not, I'm still going to get what I need. So I think that's such a powerful concept, and that really goes along with number 3, which is watch your thoughts. Talk to us more about your thoughts.
Yeah. So I really think of the thoughts that you have are kind of the marquee in your life. So if you think about like news stories that are running, they have like the headlines that run across the bottom of the screen, or even magazines, they have lots of headlines that are going through. I always think that your thoughts are going to be what you focus on. So if you have all of these thoughts like, man, my marriage is super hard, or my children are super difficult, or I do everything around here, that headline is going to find the evidence in your life. So you will go about your brain will actually go about trying to find that evidence everywhere throughout your day. So if you think my spouse doesn't love me very much, then every little thing is going to prove that thought correct. So it really does come down to, what are you thinking? What are you choosing to think? And then deciding, is it serving you to think those thoughts? And knowing that there's not one point in your life that you can't just be like, no, I'm done with this story. I'm going to rewrite a whole new chapter. And now it's going to be that I have the most amazing life ever. And then your brain will go to work creating all that evidence for yourself. Nobody outside of you needs to change. I think that's the most powerful thing, is we don't need other people to change for us to feel the way that we want to. And that's the beauty of dropping the manual. Going back to that is just, when we hold on to that manual, then we're going to be left wanting, and we're going to be so resentful, because if you guys all know, if you try and change your child, or if you try and change your spouse, it usually doesn't work, and you're going to be left waiting and wanting for a long time. So just going back inwards and saying, okay, what thoughts am I thinking? What is the manual that I have? Is it serving me? And then allow the people in your life to be them, and you just get to manage how you're thinking. It really is a beautiful place to be. It's not simple. It's not easy, but if you can do practice with this, it can change your life truly.
I believe that. I know that when you change that, it can change everything. When you change what you're thinking, because we repeat our thoughts so
Mm-hmm.
many times. It's not just like one little fleeting thought. It is over and over. And so it's powerful. I would love to hear some examples, either from you or people that you've worked with, of how you've seen this change and kind of what it can do for people.
Yeah. So I'll use one experience for me, and then I have another one that I can give you if we have time. But so my marriage for the first couple of years was a little bit rocky. I've been married to my spouse for almost 16 years, and it was rocky on my end. When I talked to my husband about this, he's like, I didn't even know it was as rocky as it was, because it was all in my mind. But I had these thoughts of, he should be taking out the trash when it's full, or he should be going outside and picking up the dog poop outside, or he should be playing with the kids more. I had all of these things that were thoughts in my head. And when I would think them, I would say, because he doesn't love me, that's why he's not doing it. Or he doesn't love our family, that's why he's not doing what I asked him to do. And it caused so much drama in my head and so much resentfulness. And it caused me to pull away in my marriage. And when I learned this concept of like, oh, he doesn't need to take out the trash for me to feel love from him. Oh, he doesn't need to play with the kids in the amount of time and the way that I think he should for the kids to know that he loves them. I had all of these ideas that I could question, and it really changed everything. So now when I see him, it's not that I have, oh, well, if you love me, you'll do this, this, and this. It's, no, what are you doing today? And how can I make it mean that you love me? I just kind of look at him and allow him to be him. And it's so much better of a place to be, because just like us, we want to be who we are. We don't want anybody changing who we are. So if I can let him be who he is, then it just allows us to just come in the middle and just have so much fun together. And that was one of the biggest ones for me in my life.
Well, that is huge. Oh, and I can see how that would make such a big difference in your relationship. I'd love to hear the one from your client also.
Yeah. So this one was actually for her child. Her child has, I can't remember what disorder it is, but it's where OCD. There you go. I'm trying to remember what it was. And it was driving her crazy. And she was getting so frustrated with her child and basically had this idea that my child isn't behaving like a good child should. She had this manual of what a good child should look like. They should do these things. They should behave this way. They should talk this way. And she was constantly trying to find out a new parenting hack or try and listen to this podcast to try and apply to change her child's OCD. And if you know anything about OCD, it's very hard to change, and it takes a lot of time for them to kind of work through that. And so she came to me super frustrated, wanting me to actually help her change her child. And we just started looking back on her and just saying, no, actually, let's look at you and what you think your child should behave like and question it all. And so we started looking at it and saying, does she really need to say these words to you for you to feel love for her? Does she really need to behave in a certain way for you to, respond the way that you want to respond? And it took a lot of time. Again, this is not like a light switch effect where everything just, oh, I totally see it and everything works beautifully. But the more that she practiced this, she could see that she was actually causing more struggle and pain for herself. And her child was just doing exactly what the child should be doing with that OCD. So when she could allow her child to have OCD and she be the parent that she wanted to be, she was able to show up more loving and more compassionate and more curious on how can I help better serve my child, rather than this child is not functioning the way that it should. And it just changed her relationship, because there was no relationship, or we love our children, but there was just a little bit more of a disconnect with her child because of the situation, because she had a manual for how they should behave for her to love them. So it's changed the way that she looks at her child. And it doesn't mean, and there's a little caveat here, that it doesn't mean that we don't have expectations or that we don't let our children make us upset sometimes, but it's just bringing it back to like, oh, I totally see that I was having a manual here in this moment. Or, oh, I can see that I was thinking a thought that was creating this emotion for me. It wasn't my child. So it's just taking back all the responsibility for yourself.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you shared these two examples, because I think that they show us why this is important and give us so much hope, because I think that sometimes we get so stuck and we feel like there's nothing I can do, and we're just looking at the other person, and there is nothing you can do to change them. That's not the point. We can't change other people, but you can absolutely change your experience through dropping the manual. I think that's so powerful in what you've shared with us today. So tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so I have a podcast too, and it's Living and Loving Your Life. It's a podcast for moms. And yeah, I kind of go through all of these different situations, these different tools, and just kind of help people apply this work that I teach to my clients. So that's a good place for them to find me.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll send people over there. You guys go check that out. And to finish, tell us, we've talked about a lot of great things today. As people are processing this information and, ready to take the next step with it, what is one little thing that you hope they will think differently or do differently because of this conversation?
My goal is for people just to start taking responsibility for how they feel. If you can understand that no one can make you feel a certain way, nothing can make you feel a certain way, it is a little bit of an identity crisis for a little bit. But if you can really take some time to really process that, then you can really understand that you can feel how you want to feel in the moment. So really taking a look at how you're thinking and how you're feeling and deciding if it's serving you is the biggest thing that I can offer to everybody.
I love it. Okay, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. What a great episode. It really got me thinking about this idea of my expectations of others and how much they really play into, whether I'm feeling frustrated with someone or what is going on with me is such a product of the way that I am projecting onto them and the way that I'm living out this manual, like Chantel talked about. So I thought that was really powerful. But what I want to know now is what stood out to you. What one little thing are you going to do differently or think about differently because of this episode? Let me know on Facebook or Instagram at Moms Who Know Podcast. And if you like this episode, the best thing you can do is to share it. Share it on social media, share it in person. Let someone know what you learned today. That helps you to learn it again and to have it deeper into you and to live it because you shared it. And it also helps me. It helps the podcast to grow. So I really appreciate when you guys take the time to share. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week on Moms Who Know.